Dagestan, population 3 million. Situated in southern Russia, this ragdolling republic is part of a region known as the Caucasus, a mountainous area that comprises of Dagestan, Chechnya, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan. If you're an MMA fan, these locations may sound familiar because they've dominated the sport the past decade. Send your son to Dagestan, 2-3 years, forget. Nowadays it's more like, send your son to Georgia, 2-3 years, forget. I'm sure a lot of fighters would love to be sent to this region because from an early age, these warriors are raised in a culture of discipline and combat sports. The mountains, the grind, the never quit attitude. And it all started with one man in the UFC, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib was the first to put Dagestan on the map in MMA. He wasn't just dominant, he was unstoppable. His style was overwhelming, breaking opponents mentally and physically. People still talk about Ankalaev supposedly giving him a tough fight, but let's be real. A state agent, it was a 50-43 scorecard. Fans went wild when Ankalaev landed a single jab. Oh! It was one of the most lopsided title fights in UFC history. However, when the Eagle retired in 2020, I'm sure many of you thought it would only be a matter of time before every champion in the UFC had this choice of facial hair. Flash forward 5 years after Khabib's retirement, and it turns out so far, 2025 has statistically been the worst year for Dagestanis. An awfully tough year for those who leave a patch of skin below the nose. Okay, enough with the Dr. Seuss beard jokes. For several years, it felt like nobody could touch these guys. If you lost but gave a Dagestani a hard fight, it didn't even feel like a loss. You earned more respect in defeat. But then 2025 happened. It all started quietly though. On the first card of the year, Magomed lost to Bruno Lopez. Barely anyone noticed. Except for the promotion though. They cut Magomed after this fight, and it was only his first career loss. They were like, sorry, we already have a Magomed with one loss at 205. We don't need more than one Dagestani threat to Pereira in this division. But shortly after this, Dagestani L's became more noticeable, as the next event on the calendar was UFC 311. Tagir Ulanbekov got the ball rolling with a win, but then the unthinkable happened. Umar Nurmagomedov, the highly touted undefeated cousin of Khabib, lost to Merab Dvalishvili, and the internet went crazy. When does the internet not go crazy? But Georgian fans didn't just celebrate, they clowned on the Dagestanis. But to be fair, this was the hardest fight of Merab's career. Umar landed massive shots, and Merab, despite taking Umar down a couple times, couldn't hold him down or even attempt to finish. Still, a loss is a loss, and the pressure on Umar was insane. When your last name's Nurmagomedov, expectations are expectations are sky high. Whenever I think sky high, I think of Nate Diaz. Luckily, Islam Makhachev won his fight Now I'm talking like him. Luckily, Islam Makhachev won his fight that night, because if he hadn't, this would have been an all-out disaster for Dagestan. Also in January, the PFL had a massive event, where Umar's little brother, Usman Nurmagomedov, another undefeated Dagestani, got a rude awakening. He walked in overconfident against Paul Hughes, and Paul made him pay. Some thought it should have been a draw, others thought Paul won outright. But one thing was clear, Usman had the toughest fight of his life. And of course, this was a great addition to the historic Ireland versus Dagestan rivalry. Only this time, no buses, dollies, or cute straw weights were harmed during the buildup of this fight. The next month, on the first day of February in Saudi Arabia, Shara Magomedov stepped into the cage against Michael Venom Page. Shara, the only Dagestani without elite wrestling, refused to grapple and paid the price. Seems like Ian Gary did have the right game plan against MVP after all. While Shara didn't. The one-eyed pirate left the fight shipwrecked by MVP. It wasn't even close. On that same card, Saeed Nurmagomedov, a Chechen not related to Khabib, he lost too. However, the Saudi card did have a few Dagestani victories. Though he fights under the French flag, the Dagestani-born Nasruddin Imavov shocked the world, knocking out the second greatest middleweight of all time in Israel Adesanya. But speaking of all-time greats, I'm talking the cream of the crop. I'm talking living legend status. Shamil Gaziev got a W for the Dagestanis that day as well. Jones didn't want to fight him. Aspinall was running scared. The only man brave enough to step up was the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson. Or is it Thomas Peterson? Either way, Shamil found a way to land the only weapon he really has, a blob-like overhand right, but it sent our founding father straight to the mat. He folded like a $5 bill. Is that the bill Jefferson's on? So those were the Dagestani highs and lows of the year so far. Just like the geography of Dagestan, it's a mountainous region, highs and lows. You get the picture. But looking forward, UFC 313 is right around the corner, with Alex Pereira set to defend his belt against Dagestan's Magomed Ankalaev. Contrary to popular belief, Ankalaev's more of a striker. His wrestling's good, but he uses it as more of a secondary skill. Ankalaev did promise a knockout against the best kickboxer in UFC history, but if I were him, I'd wrestle at least a bit, right? Or else Poatan's gonna contribute to this downward Dagestani trend as well. We also have Khamzat Chimaev, most likely set to fight DDP this summer, and this isn't a walk in the park for Khamzat. DDP is massive. DDP is one of the strongest middleweights ever. DDP is one of the most passionate coach kissers ever. And he doesn't get bullied, unless it's by his coach tasing him. This coach is wild, by the way. Tasing his students, kissing his students. Morne Visser, you put the freak in Afrikaans. Anyways, Khamzat may not be able to bum rush DDP in round 1. Experts and fans alike see a high likelihood of Khamzat's cardio being pushed to the limit here, and I can't wait to see it. And finally, the odd Dagestani out is... what's his name? He doesn't get any finishes. Movsar. In all seriousness, he's one of the most underrated fighters in the sport. But there's not too much noise surrounding him right now. No title shot, no fight lined up. So for the purposes of this video, that's a Dagestani L2. Is my L going the right way? That's a Dagestani L2. So, is 2025 the beginning of the end for Dagestani dominance? Or is this just a little rough patch? You know, like the space I mentioned below the nose earlier. A little rough patch. Let's see how these next few months play out. But if the losses keep piling up, the Dagestani aura of invincibility might be gone for good. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are we witnessing the downfall of Dagestan in MMA? Or will they bounce back to dominate again, Braza? Don't forget to like and subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss our next breakdown. I'm T-Ball Paul. Shoot me a follow on Instagram at T-Ball Paul. Signing off from SoCal.